Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point on AFR Talk. I'm Brian Fisher, the host of the program Focal Point. The network is AFR Talk. Honored to have with me in our Focal Point studio Tim Wildmon, who is the president of the American Family Association, and on our decision maker line, Neil Mammen, author of the book 40 Days Toward a More Godly Nation. You may know it as the book by the title Jesus Was or Is Involved in Politics. Why isn't your church? Neil, welcome to Focal Point with me and Tim Wildmon.
Hi, Brian. Hi, Tim.
Hey, Neil.
Well, Neil, it's great to have you on now. I was chatting in the first segment, Neil, about the evangelical vote, and I wanted to start with that because Tim's got a kind of a perspective on that I think would be good for our listeners to hear. Maybe we can kick that around a little bit. I wanted to talk with you also about the breakdown that you did in terms of the vote totals and how this election was actually much closer than it looked. But I began, Neil, just to catch you up to speed, what I talked about in the first segment is looking at the breakdown. We know that 26% of the electorate consisted of white evangelicals. 79% of those voted for Mitt Romney. So for 79% of evangelicals, his Mormonism apparently was not an issue. If it was, they found a way to get over that. And that meant that there were about 30.8 million evangelicals that voted. I did the math on this. If 79% of evangelicals voted for Governor Romney, that meant that 24.3 million voted for Governor Romney and 6.5 million white evangelicals voted for Barack Obama. So the point I made, if the vote differential now is about 2.5 million, the point I made is from one vantage point, you could say that white evangelicals put Barack Obama in the White House because 6.5 million of them voted for them, and the vote differential was about 2.5 million. And Tim, kind of what's your perspective on those issues?
I hear those numbers, Brian. Those are the numbers you and Neil. That was in Neil's email. That's Neil's. Yeah,
Neil's going to. I want to talk with Neil about kind of the breakdown in the overall vote, not necessarily the evangelical vote, but the overall vote.
Here's where I guess I disagree with the idea that the reason why Obama won was because of the white evangelicals who voted for Obama. If you look at the map of the United States, and you break it down by electoral college, then to me there's not a state that's on the map that would either be that you could flip of any significance from red to blue, from blue to red, because Christians didn't vote in that state. You guys may have stats to contradict what I just said or counter what I just said. So what I'm saying to you is all the states where Christian evangelicals have a great influence, where there are a high percentage of them, they all went red. Where there is a very few Christian evangelicals, they all went blue. So that's my point. That's why I don't look at, unless you can tell me in Ohio that the Christians didn't come out, the evangelicals didn't come out to vote for Romney, then you might lay, although to me that's still a pretty severe responsibility to bear when you have over, how many people voted?
118 million.
118 million. I wouldn't lay it all on the Christian evangelicals while Obama was in the White House.
And you've got a good point there, Tim, too, about the fact that the evangelical vote is not evenly distributed all over the United States for the reasons that you talked about. You got blue states, red states. In fact, I did a little bit of calibration to talk about the states that I was focusing on, similar to the ones that Neil talked about. And I tried to do the math. And again, I was assuming the numbers were the same in all the states. I couldn't find a state of the 5 that would have been flipped if 100% of the evangelicals had voted for
well, that's
Governor
my
Romney.
point.
That wouldn't have been enough to flip any one of those states. It would have taken more than just the evangelicals.
It depends on how you count that number, because if you look at Florida, only 47,000 people made the difference. In other words, Obama won Florida with 47,000 people. Now that's a state with, I don't know, 10, 12 million people in it?
No, it's probably 20 million.
Okay, 20 million, right? So now are we trying to say that there aren't 47,000 more Christians that could have been voting in that election?
Well, Southeast Florida is what won that state for Obama. You got high Jew population, retired people. You got ethnic groups down there, Hispanics, and they all went for Obama. So I don't think you could counteract that with enough Christians in Florida to overcome that, in my opinion.
Yeah, in northern Florida, it doesn't matter where in Florida, but as long as we can pull out 50,000 more Christians. Now, how many churches do we think are in Florida?
How do we know? How do we know we didn't max out on the vote?
We don't.
To me, we're blaming people that don't need to be blamed. That's what I'm saying to you guys.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying that we should blame the Christians. I'm just saying that we need to work hard to find these people, because I can't imagine it's hard to find 50,000 more voters in Florida. I don't think everybody in Florida voted.
If they didn't get motivated to go vote in this election right here, they're not going to go get motivated to go vote. We're not going to reach them. They're idiots. Okay, I'm sorry. They are. They're not paying attention. They don't care. And I don't know what we can do to get them to care if they didn't care about this particular election.
And I believe the reason they don't care is because they haven't been educated by their pastors and by their friends.
Well, that may be true, but anyway.
For instance, I can give you examples. When we started the 40-day series in various churches, I've had people send me emails saying, I was not interested in politics. I did not want to get involved in it. It just did not matter to me. And by starting this 40-day series, I realized the pivotal responsibility I have. And now that's just in one church. I got one email, and that's a smaller church. So if we can start getting this message out there where people realize that they need to be involved. Because I know just in California, I remember when I first started writing this, the impetus for writing the book was back in 1998. When we lost the governorship to Gray Davis with 500,000 votes. And I said, I can't believe in a state with 30 million people, back then I think maybe it was 28 million people, that there aren't 500,000 more Christians who don't vote. Or in this case, if you look at it, if you see 24% of us or 25% of evangelical Christians voted for the wrong cause because they don't understand the principles. So we can reach those people. So I think the argument here is not to convince atheists to vote Christian values, but to convince Christians to vote Christian values and Christians to actually go and vote rather than not voting. Well, and I think that we have a powerful platform to do that if we're just talking to our own friends and family and people in the pews.
Well, maybe a more positive way to put on this, and I know I hear what Tim is saying about not wanting to blame people that really shouldn't be blamed, but I guess the other way to look at that, maybe in a positive sense, Tim, would be, we're less than 200,000 votes shy of giving Governor Romney the popular vote victory. And I guess that's the point that maybe Neil is making, and I kind of echo that we probably, between now and 2016, we can probably find 200,000 white evangelicals that didn't vote in 08 and convince them that maybe next time around they shouldn't sit this one out. So I guess, to me, there's a kind of a note of optimism. This might be a doable thing for 2016.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to focus on, you're going to see if that's true in Ohio and Florida, because that's going to determine the next president for the foreseeable future. Those two states in particular, maybe Virginia. But if you look at the map of the country, where evangelical Christianity is prominent, they're red. The states are red. Where it's basically atheists and agnostics and a small percentage, and other religions, and a small percentage of evangelical Christians, the states are blue. I don't know why that is exactly. I have my own theory on that. I think you guys would share that theory. But I talked to a friend who has radio stations in New England, Christian radio stations, and he said, New England has gone the way of Europe. He said they're basically a godless people. He didn't mean that in the sense that they're ruthless or they're mean or anything like that. They just have no interest in religion. Mm. And so it doesn't influence their daily lives. So they're blue states, where that persists.
I want to update that because I think some of the folks may not have understood the basis of our email. The discussion here was based on an email and a blog I wrote that Brian and Tim read, where I said the actual loss to the states. I don't know if you covered this, Brian.
Yeah, I did it in the first segment.
Yeah, it was about 0.34% of the total vote was what we lost this battle with. So it's not. Secondly, it's not a mandate from the masses. It's not like Obama won overwhelmingly. It's not a reason for the GOP or the GOP, I mean the Republicans, to turn away from their conservative ways. In fact, if anything, I think it's an indication that they need to go more conservative, because that's how they're going to get those people who didn't vote, the 3 million people who stayed out. In fact, if you compare the number of people who voted this election versus the last election, 3 million evangelicals or Republicans didn't even show up to vote.
Well, and the other, Tim and I, we were looking at the electoral map on Tuesday night to back up or to illustrate what you were saying, and you look at the red-blue map. Mm-hmm. It's like you have three segments in the United States geographically. You have the upper Midwest, which is blue, and New England, which is blue. Then you can start like North Carolina, South Carolina, go all the way across clear to
Mountain West.
Till the Mountain West, clear to the border of California, Oregon, and that is just solid red, clear up to the Canadian border, except maybe for New Mexico, Colorado. And then you got the West Coast states. So it's like you got these
two countries in one.
Two countries in one.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I don't know. Again, I don't think it's coincidental that the red represents where evangelical Christians live, and where a large percentage of them, and those evangelical Christianity of itself is a cultural influence in those places. In the blue states, it's not. They're liberal, secular, and in the case of, I guess, Michigan or Wisconsin. And maybe Ohio, maybe a large percentage of Roman Catholics. Catholics don't vote like evangelicals do. They're 50-50 on things.
So here's my challenge. Here's my challenge to the listeners. If you have listeners in Florida or Nevada or Ohio, is in Florida, can you come up, Christians in Florida, can you come up with 50,000 more Christian voters for the next election? In Ohio, can you come up with 100,000 more Christian voters in the next election? Or change over, 50,000 voters from who voted for Obama to now vote for a conservative Christian values? I think that's very doable. I think that's very doable with our series, especially if we take the series and we start going into churches and we say, hey, just do this as a small group study. We've had people change their minds in days after starting the series.
And the name of that book is 40 Days Toward a More Godly Nation. It comes with a DVD that features an interview with Tim Wildmon and my guest, Neil Mammen. So, Neil, thanks a lot for sitting in with us. Appreciate it very much. And, Tim, thank you for dropping in with us.
Absolutely,
Appreciate it very much. We'll be right back with more. You're listening to Focal Point on AFR Talk. And, one of the other states where it might work would be Iowa. Iowa kind of surprises me because I look at Iowa as a strong evangelical presence there. And yet it went for Barack Obama this year by an 88,500 vote margin. I think that might be a doable one, too. Focal Point AFR Talk.